Why Israel eats bitter herbs. Bitter herbs are an essential part of the Passover Seder, the ceremonial meal that commemorates the exodus of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. But what is the meaning and significance of these herbs, and how did they become part of the Jewish tradition? The origin of eating bitter herbs can be traced back to a single verse in the book of Exodus, where God commands the Israelites to eat the Passover lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, Exodus 12 verse 8. This was to be done on the night before their departure from Egypt, when God would strike down the firstborn of every Egyptian household and spare those who had marked their doorposts with the blood of the lamb. The bitter herbs were meant to remind the Israelites of their bitter experience of slavery and oppression under Pharaoh, who made their lives bitter with harsh labor in brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields, Exodus 1 verse 14. The herbs were also a contrast to the sweet taste of freedom and redemption that God was about to grant them. According to Jewish tradition, there are 5 types of bitter vegetables that can be used for the Seder: romaine lettuce, endive, chicory, horseradish, and nettles. Each of these has a symbolic meaning related to the Exodus story. For example, romaine lettuce starts out sweet but becomes bitter over time, just like the Israelites' situation in Egypt. Horseradish is very sharp and pungent, representing the harshness of slavery. Endive is very bitter, symbolizing the tears that the Israelites shed. The bitter herbs are eaten twice during the Seder. The first time is after reciting a blessing over them, as a separate item. The second time is together with matzah and karaset, a sweet paste made of fruits and nuts that represents the mortar that the Israelites used to build for Pharaoh. This combination is known as karek, or the sandwich, and it follows the example of Rabbi Hillel, a famous sage who lived in the 1st century CE. He would wrap matzah, bitter herbs, and roasted meat, from the Passover sacrifice, together and eat them as one. By doing so, he fulfilled the commandment to eat the lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, Exodus 12 verse 8. The bitter herbs are not only a reminder of the past, but also a lesson for the present and the future. They teach us to appreciate the freedom and blessings that God has given us, and not to take them for granted. They also inspire us to empathize with those who are still suffering from oppression and injustice in our world, and to work for their liberation and dignity. As it says in the Passover Haggadah, in every generation, each person must see themselves as if they personally left Egypt. By eating bitter herbs, we connect ourselves to our ancestors' story and to our own responsibility as God's people. Significance of eating bitter. Bitter herbs are plants that have a sharp or unpleasant taste, such as horseradish, endive, chicory, dandelion, arugula, mustard greens, and radicchio. They stimulate the production of saliva, gastric juices, and bile, which help with digestion and detoxification. They also have anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, antifungal, and antiviral properties, which can boost the immune system and fight infections. Some bitter herbs also contain antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals that can protect against oxidative stress and chronic diseases. Eating bitter herbs can also have spiritual benefits for our body. According to the Bible, bitterness is a sign of unforgiveness, resentment, anger, and sin in our hearts, Hebrews 12 verse 15. By eating bitter herbs, we can acknowledge our need for God's grace and forgiveness and extend it to others who have wronged us. We can also remember God's faithfulness and goodness in our lives and thank Him for His mercy and love. Eating bitter herbs can help us cleanse our hearts from bitterness and fill them with gratitude and joy. Eating bitter herbs is not only a tradition that connects us to our ancestors in faith, but also a practice that can benefit our body in many ways. By eating bitter herbs regularly, we can improve our digestion, immunity, and overall health. We can also use them as an opportunity to reflect on our spiritual condition and relationship with God. Eating bitter herbs can help us experience the sweetness of His presence and His promises in our lives. Please don't forget to subscribe. You are blessed. See you on my next video.